Chapter 8, Part 2 of Contracts, and we're picking up with voluntary consent. This is ending out Chapter 8 and the requirements of a contract. One thing that you have to have is voluntary consent by both parties. If you don't have that, then the contract can be voided. So there are four ways of looking at this. First one are mistakes of facts, and these are material facts, okay? They can be unilateral, where one of the parties may not have all of the facts, so they may not be able to correct it unless the other party knew the difference and didn't say anything, or it was a mathematical error. Bilateral is a mutual mistake by both. Both parties can void it, and there should be everybody should be on the same page for the terminology being used or the semantic interpretation. Let's look and see what we have for a link here. And here we go. This is called material mistake of fact. And the contract can be rescinded by either party in a bilateral case. And in a unilateral mistake, one party is mistaken. And usually, in a unilateral mistake, there have to be some conditions met. If the other party knew or should have known, that a mistake was made, they should have said something. If that, didn't happen, then it could possibly be voided. The other one is if there were a mathematical error in the calculation, such as if you put in a bid and the contract wasn't calculated right and you were going to lose $10,000, you could void a contract if it were accepted. And that's mistake of fact, and that's usually facts of material. These are hard copy facts. The other kind is mistake of value or quality, and then usually in that situation neither can void the contract, such as if you bought a violin and you bought a violin for $200 and found out the violin was worth $2 million. That contract could not be voided by the other party wanting to get the violin back, simply because nobody knew at the time. So mistakes of value or quality, in most cases, neither party can void that contract. There's fraudulent misrepresentation, and that one, fraud has to be proven. If it's a statement of opinion, generally, if I could say my house is located with the best view in the whole world, and somebody buys it and it isn't the best view in their opinion, that's an opinion, so you can't void the contract in that case. If the stated opinion is from an expert, such as an attorney or an accountant, and you sign the contract on that basis, and the opinion is in their area of expertise, there's a possibility that you could get that voided. If there's a misrepresentation of law, let's say, I think the example in the book was somebody bought a piece of land and was told by the seller that they could build a condo up to the sky, and they found out that it was illegal to do that in the area, unless the seller, was an attorney or somebody who should have known that, such as a zoning official or even a real estate individual. The contract could be voided in that case. Misrepresentation by silence is kind of interesting, because unless you are asked about a specific characteristic about what you are selling, it is all right to be silent about it. If you're asked about a characteristic, you have to be truthful. Otherwise, the contract could be voided. Intent to deceive, scienter, or what they also call guilty knowledge. If you intentionally um, uh, give out false information to sell something, then the contract could be voided. This has to be proven. This has to have evidence of. And if the other person relies on the misrepresentation as the full reason for buying whatever you're selling, it could be voided. And then to recover damages caused by fraud, proof of injury has to be very evident and has to be proven. Fraudulent misrepresentation requires proof. And you have to be cautious of how you say things, so as not to put yourself in that position. Contracts will be voided by undue influence, because if you're influenced unduly, you're not voluntarily consenting to that. And also if you're under duress, if you're forced or under threat, then you must be able to prove that again. Those are kind of the stipulations of voluntary consent. There are many, many more out there, but these are the ones that we're covering right now. The final thing we look at is the statutes of fraud, which basically lays out the written requirements for a contract. The name implies it's to stop contracts before they become fraud. So what has to be in writing for a contract? Well, land contracts, any bit of personal property should be in writing. Anything that has to be recorded in a legal manner should be in a written contract. Contracts for more than 1 year, that would go outside of the contract terms. Collateral contracts, marriage contracts, be they prenuptials or anything to do with marriage, needs to be in written form. And contracts for sale of goods over $500 should be in written form. So those are the writing requirements and the type of contracts that need to have written form. There are some exceptions to the statutes of fraud, being if a contract's been partially performed, you may not be able to void it. If somebody admits to an oral contract that was supposed to be written but says, yeah, that was our agreements, that contract could still be void, could still be valid and non-voidable. Promissory estoppel, and remember that's where you rely on that promise and either forestall action or do a specific action with the full intent of receiving that promise. And then contracts for custom goods can be oral even if they are over $500. And then you come down to, okay, so what's sufficient for writing? A written contract, obviously. I would think the more concrete the goods being transferred back and forth, or the higher the dollar amount, the more I would want a very solid contract. You could have a written memorandum that is signed anywhere on the page with just the initials, a name, and it can be electronic. You could have several documents attached together, or even in an envelope, such as an invoice, a bill of sale, the shipping. If you have all of those together, those could be considered a written contract, a written form. And they must contain some essential terms of what's going on and what's being exchanged and what's involved with the contract. It must show voluntary agreement. You must state the quantity, and you need to have it signed by the party seeking enforcement, which means it only has to be signed by one person within the agreement. Think of getting a loan from a bank. That's a contract, but the bank doesn't sign it. you sign it, and they will be enforced to you. The enforcement would come to you. So that pretty well wraps us up. We've got a couple of questions, though, that I want to finish up. True or false, exculpatory clauses relieves the offerer of all responsibility, no matter what the circumstances. Question 4 is true or false. In a bilateral mistake of fact, both parties can void the contract. And the third one is which contract is not required to be written to be valid. Which contracts in that is listed do not need to be written. I didn't write that very well. And that wraps us up. Thank you.